My dad chose my stepson's wedding over mine and demanded I change my date. But Grandpa's final gift triggered a twist that ended his empire forever. I, 28, female, am in dire need of guidance regarding my wedding circumstances. Family drama has made what could have been a great situation into a total nightmare. I'll start from the beginning to help you understand how we got here, because there's a lot to unpack. I grew up in what I believe to be a happy family as an only child. Weekend excursions with my parents, family game evenings, and my dad teaching me how to ride a bike are all part of my early recollections. The type of father who would construct tree houses for me and ward off monsters beneath my bed. He was my hero. But when I was 14, everything changed. The day my parents sat me down and announced their impending divorce is still fresh in my mind. Mom had discovered that Dad was having an affair with his coworker, Laura, 42, female. Dad and Laura were married 6 months after the divorce was finalized. That's when Aaron entered my life. He was 25 at the time, Laura's son from a previous relationship. The transition was anything but smooth or easy for me. After spending my entire childhood as an only child, I suddenly found myself with a stepbrother, someone I hadn't asked for and didn't know how to relate to. My father immediately embraced his new role with enthusiasm, making it his personal mission to become the perfect father figure for Aaron, whose biological father had walked out on him when he was just a young boy. In the beginning, I actually felt a sense of admiration watching my dad step up this way. Here was a child who had been abandoned and hurt, and my father was offering him the stability and love he deserved. It seemed like such a noble, generous thing to do. I told myself it was temporary, that once Aaron adjusted to our family, things would balance out. What I didn't realize, what I couldn't have predicted, was that this well-intentioned effort would gradually erode my own relationship with my father. It was a slow death, so subtle that I barely noticed it happening until it was too late. The changes came gradually but relentlessly, each one chipping away at what we used to have. Those cherished Sunday morning father-daughter breakfasts we'd shared for years, they transformed into mandatory family breakfasts, where Aaron's baseball schedule dominated every conversation. The dance recitals my dad had never missed throughout my childhood, he began skipping them with increasing frequency, always because Aaron had a practice session or an important game that same day. What struck me most was watching my father, a man who had never shown the slightest interest in baseball, who couldn't tell a home run from a strike, volunteer to become assistant coach for Aaron's team, dedicating countless hours to a sport he knew nothing about, all for his new stepson. My mother remarried David, a good man who had a job offer in another state when I was 16. Despite everything, I wanted to be near my dad, so I chose to stay when they asked if I wanted to relocate with them. In retrospect, I wish I had chosen differently. The real breaking point came during my senior year of college, a moment that would crystallize everything I'd been denying about my relationship with my father. It happened on a rainy evening when I was driving home from campus. Out of nowhere, another car blew through a red light and slammed into me. The impact was severe. I suffered internal bleeding in my intestines and was rushed into emergency surgery. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive. My mother and David didn't hesitate for a second. They immediately booked flights and arrived at the hospital as quickly as they could, sitting by my bedside through those first critical hours. But my dad? He sent me a text message, not a phone call, a text. He explained that Aaron was going through an emotional crisis because his girlfriend had just broken up with him, and he needed to be there for him, so he couldn't come to the hospital. I spent 3 full days recovering in that sterile hospital room, going through the fear and pain alone as far as my father was concerned. He never showed up, not once. That's when I finally understood where I truly stood in his priorities. After graduation, I made a conscious decision to invest my energy into building a life that was entirely my own, separate from the dysfunction of my father's household. That's when I met Mike at work. He was 30 years old and had just started as the new IT manager at my company. We struck up an easy friendship almost immediately, bonding over our shared passions, weekend hiking adventures and late-night discussions about classic science fiction films. 3 years of dating flew by, filled with the kind of simple happiness I'd been searching for. Then, one morning, Mike took me on a sunrise hike to the scenic overlook that had become our special place. As the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, he got down on one knee and proposed. It was absolutely perfect, intimate, meaningful, and so completely us. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like all the broken pieces were finally coming together into something whole and beautiful. We sent out invitations 6 months in advance and decided to get married on October 15th of this year. I debated whether or not to ask Dad to escort me down the aisle for weeks. He was still my father in spite of everything, and I secretly hoped that this would be our opportunity to mend our relationship. A month prior to the wedding, I made the decision to hold off and surprise him with the request. However, Dad called me to lunch before I could ask him. Dad avoided making eye contact and appeared anxious. At last he revealed the shocking news. Dad had already agreed to be Aaron's best man, and Aaron was getting married on October 15th. I had the impression that I had been punched in the stomach. I asked Aaron why he picked the same day, and he told me it was the day he and his fiancée initially met 2 years prior. I mentioned that Aaron was aware of our date, and that we had sent out our invitations months prior. Dad's reaction, since my venue was more flexible while Aaron's was extremely exclusive, he recommended that I change my date. I wouldn't alter our date. Deposits had already been made, invitations had been sent, and relatives were traveling in from abroad. Dad accused me of being self-centered and disregarding Aaron's sentiments when I attempted to explain this. He claimed that because Aaron never had a real father figure, he needed him more. When my grandfather, Mom's father, learned the situation blew out. He and I have always been close, particularly since my parents' divorce. He offered to take me down the aisle right away since he was upset with my dad. Then Dad made an unexpected announcement. He said he would give his vacation home to Mike and me as a wedding present. It is a stunning waterfront property that we have always appreciated. Dad abruptly changed his mind. He contacted me and said he could make both weddings work, showing up at my reception to dance with me after serving as Aaron's best man at the ceremony. He began accusing me of destroying the family and forcing him to make a decision when I didn't agree right away. Karma, however, had other ideas, it seems. That Aaron did not ask Dad to his wedding 2 weeks prior. Aaron wanted his biological father to be his best man instead, according to Dad, who called me in tears, assuming he could just lead me down the aisle as if nothing had happened. Dad was now free to take part in every aspect of my wedding. No, I told him. Given his extraordinary generosity, I didn't want to upset my grandfather by denying him this moment because he had stepped up when Dad stepped out. Dad went totally crazy. He began shouting that I was being deceived by my grandfather, that I was selling my loyalty for a house, and that I was putting money before family. I blocked his number after hanging up on him. His whole family is now accusing me of being materialistic and callous. Dad is hurting. Therefore, my stepmother Lara says I should be more compassionate since he's now available. Even some of my friends believe I'm being too harsh and that I should give him another try. However, I don't believe I'm mistaken. This goes beyond the wedding. It's about years of being viewed as Aaron's second best and having my needs and feelings ignored in favor of Aaron. Since he's only coming to me because his first choice didn't work out, why should I give him this unique moment? Our rehearsal was scheduled to begin at 5 o'clock that evening at the venue. Everything was progressing smoothly and according to plan. The bridesmaids were gracefully practicing their synchronized walking patterns down the aisle, their movements becoming more coordinated with each run-through. Mike's young nephew was doing an absolutely wonderful job in his role as ring-bearer, taking his responsibilities seriously despite his age, and carrying the practice rings with adorable determination. My grandfather stood tall and proud, rehearsing the deeply meaningful moment when he would escort me down the aisle toward my future husband. The atmosphere was warm, filled with laughter and anticipation. Everyone seemed relaxed and happy, exactly how a wedding rehearsal should feel. Then everything changed in an instant. My father appeared without warning or invitation. At first, none of us were aware of his presence. He had somehow slipped into the back of the venue undetected, positioning himself in the shadows along the sidelines where he could watch everything unfold. He remained silent and still during our first complete run-through, simply observing with an intensity that nobody noticed. We were all too focused on perfecting the ceremony details to sense the storm that was brewing. It wasn't until we were halfway through our second practice run that he finally revealed himself. His voice suddenly exploded through the venue, shattering the peaceful atmosphere we'd carefully created. He was shouting at the top of his lungs, his words echoing off the walls. He screamed that everything we were doing was completely wrong, that this entire arrangement was a mockery of tradition. His voice cracked with emotion as he declared that he was my real father, my biological father, and that this fact alone gave him a greater and more legitimate right to walk me down the aisle than my grandfather could ever have. He rushed down the aisle and shoved past my bridesmaids. Bless him, my grandfather made an effort to remain composed. Protectively, he moved in front of me and beckoned Dad away. Dad became even more irate as a result. He began bringing up old family history, saying that my grandfather had never liked him and that the house offer had turned me against him. He even claimed that my grandfather was attempting to purchase his way into the position of father of the bride. The worst thing, Dad could not stand up straight, and his sentences were slurred, so it was obvious he had been drinking before. Before venue security arrived, Dad attempted to physically shove my grandfather away from me after Mike phoned them. Fortunately, Mike's brother intervened and restrained him. The entire event was terrifying. My mom was taping everything in case we needed proof for a restraining order. My bridesmaids were stunned, and my flower girls were crying. Dad started yelling at me as security escorted him out, saying that I was dead to him and that I would regret putting money before blood. It was simultaneously heartbreaking and humiliating. However, this is when things took a surprising turn. My stepmother Laura had slipped in behind Dad. In all the confusion, she drew me aside after he left and asked if we could speak in private. I was completely stunned by what she disclosed. Laura believes that Aaron had purposefully orchestrated this entire wedding date catastrophe. She handed me screenshots of 3 months' worth of chats between Aaron and his fiancée. Although they had talked about a number of potential wedding dates, Aaron insisted on October 15th since it was my date. He boasted in his texts that he was going to show Dad that he loved him more than I did. The really terrible thing, though, my father was aware of this. Aaron freely shared his idea with Dad in texts that Laura showed me. Dad had replied that he understood Aaron's feelings and would back Aaron's decision rather than shutting it down, knowing that I would have to reschedule my date or risk losing Aaron as a part of my ceremony. Dad even assisted Aaron in booking the location. Ibersfren. As she showed me all of this, Laura was in tears. She claimed to have witnessed Dad's favoritism of Aaron for years, but she always justified it by telling herself that Aaron needed more help because his biological father wasn't there. But after witnessing Dad's handling of this matter, she realized how poisonous things had gotten. The family dynamic I observed was only the beginning, she disclosed. It seems that Dad has been snooping around and turning down invite 760 to family gatherings where I would be expected, claiming that I was too busy or that I didn't want to attend. He has been giving Aaron details about my life and pushing him to match my accomplishments. In fact, when I got engaged, Dad advised Aaron to pop the question to his fiancée very far away in order to avoid falling behind. Laura expressed her sincere regret for not speaking up sooner. She claimed that she is divorcing Dad because she can no longer put up with his actions, particularly after witnessing him attempt to physically threaten my grandfather at the rehearsal. She has come to the realization that Dad is actively supporting Aaron's efforts to exclude me from the family, not merely playing favorites. Despite all of 291 this drama, I'm more sure than ever of my choice, and the wedding is tomorrow. We've hired additional security to make sure Dad can't enter the venue, and my grandfather will lead me down the aisle. I declined Mike's suggestion that we postpone if I needed more time to take it all in. I refused to let our beautiful day be ruined by Dad and Aaron's games. Some of Dad's family members continue to support him, saying that family should be together, and that I'm exaggerating. I'm done feeling bad, though. After seeing those texts and seeing Dad's inebriated outburst, this is about years of emotional abuse and manipulation that I'm finally seeing clearly. It's not about the house, the money, or even who will accompany me down the aisle anymore. I just want to concentrate on my wedding for the time being, but Lara stated she would testify if I wanted a restraining order. My grandfather, mom, stepdad, and my wonderful fiancé are all on my side. Perhaps it is all the family I require. Ibrahim, my grandfather, escorted me down the aisle. Mike's vows brought everyone to tears of joy, and the additional security made sure there were no unwelcome disruptions. Everything about my wedding went flawlessly. Even our first married holiday was spent at my grandfather's lake house, which is now our official residence. However, I received a call from my cousin Amy yesterday. As Lara's niece, she went to Aaron's wedding, and what she told me completely upended everything. Do you recall how Dad said Aaron declined his invitation and went with his biological father? It was an outright falsehood. Amy claims that Aaron never asked Dad not to come. In reality, it was far more deliberate. 3 months before the wedding, Aaron's biological father, who had been gone all of his life, unexpectedly made a reappearance. We're talking about an $80,000 celebration at a prestigious vineyard, and he felt bad for leaving Aaron. As a way to make things right, he volunteered to cover the entire wedding. Dad felt intimidated when Aaron's biological father offered to cover half of Aaron's wedding expenses, which came to almost $40,000. It drove him insane that he couldn't match that degree of generosity. Dad viewed Aaron's reconnection with his biological father as competition rather than a positive development. The actual kicker, Dad decided not to attend the wedding himself. He informed Aaron that if the biological father was covering all of the costs, he would not go. In fact, he attempted to force Aaron to choose between having Dad serve as his best man and having his ideal wedding paid for. Dad yelled at Aaron when he decided to have the wedding paid for, of course. However, he made up the excuse about not being invited rather than telling me this. He believed that by playing the victim, he would win my sympathy and be able to lead everything's worsen. Videos from Aaron's wedding reception that Amy showed me showed Dad watching from the parking lot in the background. He watched the celebration through the windows of the venue for hours while he sat in his car. No one wanted to cause a commotion by alerting security, but a few attendees observed and felt uneasy. What Dad has been telling everyone about my grandfather's gift is the most annoying thing. He is circulating allegations among the family that I looked around for a partner and offered my grandfather's house to the person who showed the greatest interest in me. He's telling people that I deceived my grandfather into giving up his land and that he's getting old. On social media, some family members have started making crude remarks about our wedding pictures since they even think he's real. A relative wrote, "It's sad how some people trade family loyalty for material gain. I hope the house was worth losing your father over," said another uncle. I drove to Dad's house because I was so furious and wanted to tell him everything I knew, a bad concept. Rather than offering an apology or even acknowledging it, he attempted to defend his behavior. He said that by inventing the tale of Aaron not inviting him, he was testing my loyalty. He said that regardless of the house gift, I would have demanded that he escort me down the aisle if I truly loved him. Then, because Aaron is also related, he had the gall to insist that Aaron receive a portion of my grandfather's present because it's not fair that Aaron receives nothing and I receive such a great present. He genuinely proposed that we sell the lake house and divide the proceeds. He threatened to challenge the property transfer in court when I declined. I was both relieved and appalled when I left his place. I just know that I made the proper choice. Every time I learned something new after that. Lara called me and told me that ever since my grandfather made the gift announcement, Dad has been obsessed with the lake house. He and Aaron apparently thought I would allow them to use it for weekend fishing excursions since we're family. Because of Dad's disparaging remarks about my grandfather and me, I've made the decision to have my attorney write him a cease and desist letter in order to defend against Dad's untrue statements on his mental health. My grandfather is also investigating his legal alternatives. Aaron has been tweeting passively aggressively, about fake family members and gold diggers on social media, but he hasn't spoken to me directly. He and anyone who backs his and Dad's story have been blocked by me. I'm concentrating on getting settled in our new house with Mike and attempting to put all of this turmoil behind us right now. Decided to stop communicating with my dad and his side of the family entirely in light of the turmoil and disclosures of the last few months. It has been a wild ride for the last 3 months. As I indicated in my previous post, Dad did attempt to challenge the transfer of the lake house. He launched a lawsuit arguing that he ought to have some influence on my grandfather's property choices because he is my father. After my grandfather produced copious records attesting to his mental capacity and his explicit desire to transfer the land to Mike and me, his attorney finally abandoned the case. When Dad lost the court battle, his response was explosive. When he arrived at my place of employment, he created such a commotion that my employer had to bar him from the building. He yelled that I had stolen his retirement dream, implying that he and Aaron had intended to use the lake house as a fishing hideaway. Our restraining order documentation now includes the security footage of his outburst. Even more information about Dad's actions over the years was made public during Laura's divorce procedures. She discovered emails in which he and Aaron would purposefully schedule family get-togethers to clash with my crucial dates. They would purposefully plan events for when they knew I had obligations, then use my absence to portray me as the heartless relative. Spreadsheets were actually used to keep track of my schedule in order to generate these conflicts. The most startling revelation was found in Laura's divorce documents. It turns out that Dad had been putting money aside in a different account for years, money that was meant to be for Aaron and me. But, according to the account statements, every cent was used on Aaron's schooling, vehicle, and now his wedding. Prior to Dad leaving, when Laura questioned this, Dad said my mom and grandfather could support me so I didn't need the money. Aaron is also not managing the situation properly. It appears that his biological father's involvement backfired, since following the wedding he stopped answering Aaron's calls. Aaron has been attempting to get back in touch with his father, but he is too busy with the divorce and litigation to give him any attention. Aaron has been going on lengthy social media tirades about how I destroyed his family by stealing his future lake house and turning Laura against Dad. Through all of this, my grandfather, may he be blessed, has been a tremendous source of support. It has been touching to watch him and Mike connect over home renovation tasks as they work on remodeling portions of the lake house. This year, my mom, stepdad, grandfather, and a few close friends who supported us will be the only ones attending our first Christmas celebration there. Lara contacted me last week to inform me that following the completion of the divorce, she would be relocating to a different state. She thanked me for giving her the confidence to go and apologized once more for not realizing Dad's manipulation sooner. Even though we're not close, I admire her for finally confronting Dad's actions. The extended family is mainly divided into 2 groups, those who have seen through Dad's lies and those who still believe them. It seems quite liberating to have lost contact with some relatives. They are the only family I need, and the people that matter have stayed. Brr, I'm getting used to living in the lake house with Mike. I occasionally catch myself feeling depressed about Dad's situation, but then I recall all the spreadsheets, the prearranged arguments, the deception, and the manipulation. When he decided Aaron was the only child worth his time and effort, I lost him years ago, so I know I'm not losing a parent. In times of self-doubt, your messages and remarks enabled me to maintain my position. Walking away from toxic family members, including parents, might be the healthiest course of action. Sometimes the hardest option is the correct one.